Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, Joyce defeats Christian Hammer by a 4th round TKO to move to 14-0 with 13 knockouts in the heavyweight division. And I would say this was your typical Joyce fight. Very exciting. A few defensive vulnerabilities here and there, but ultimately Joyce's pressure was just far too much for Christian Hammer. But yeah, going into this fight, I did wonder whether Christian Hammer would actually come to fight or just spoil, but to his credit, he actually tried his best in this fight. He tried to fight fire with fire, but obviously it was to no avail. The first round was actually very entertaining, and early on in Joyce fights, there's no doubt he can be caught. You know, it usually takes Joyce a round or two before that diesel engine starts to kick in. And yeah, early on in this fight, Christian Hammer managed to catch Joyce slipping defensively on several occasions, and the shot he was throwing was the looping overhand right, and he would bring that shot from low and bring it over the top of Joyce's lead left hand. Joyce's lead left hand was pretty low throughout the first round, and Christian Hammer was able to take advantage of that, and he landed 4 or 5 flush overhand rights in the first round, and he actually countered Joyce's jab a couple of times with the overhand right also. First round was very competitive. Joyce had the better work rate, but I would argue that Christian Hammer landed the more eye-catching shots. But, you know, after round 1, Joyce found his rhythm and he upped the work rate, and really that was all she wrote at that point in time. In the second, Christian Hammer's output dropped relatively significantly, and he was spending a lot of time stationary against the ropes, which invited the pressure from Joyce, and you could tell very early in this fight that Christian Hammer did not have the conditioning to match Joyce, and we saw that at the start of the second round. You know, Joyce brings that pace and pressure that very few heavyweights can contend with. I know Christian Hammer wasn't really in shape, but still, he got drowned in this fight. So yeah, round 2, Joyce was closing the distance, landing those clubbing shots around the side of Hammer's guard. He was starting to chip away at the body as well of Christian Hammer. The only thing I wanted to see more of from Joyce was his jab. He didn't really set much up with the jab in this fight, which is, you know, his jab is underrated, there's no doubt about it, but didn't really use it that much in this fight, though I don't really believe he had much respect for what was coming back from Christian Hammer. So yeah, Joyce dominated round 2. I mean, Hammer got a couple of sneaky overhand rights in and a couple of left hooks as well, but Joyce completely outworked Christian Hammer in the second round. Round 3 was the start of the beatdown. Hammer just couldn't keep Joyce honest, and once again he was spending far too much time on the ropes, and he was just letting Joyce work as he was covering up, looking for the odd speculative overhand right. Joyce did a good job of splitting the guard of Christian Hammer with his right uppercut. He caught Hammer, with that shot several times, a really good shot by Joyce. And yeah, third round I felt he did a really good job of varying his attacks, varying the punches. And yeah, he put a bit of a beating on Christian Hammer in the third round, and he actually dropped him towards the end of the third round. I'm not really convinced it was a knockdown. It was a cuffing left hook by Joyce, kind of caught Christian Hammer on the shoulder / back of the neck, and Hammer went down, basically due to exhaustion more than being hurt, but it was counted as a knockdown, and that was that. Round 4 was where this fight ended. Towards the start of the 4th round, Christian Hammer tried to open up with a combination. Joyce punched with him, and he landed a really good short right hook under the arm of Christian Hammer, and that sent Christian Hammer down. He was hurt by that body shot. Christian Hammer beats the count, but, you know, you can tell that it's a matter of time. Joyce jumps right over him, and he opens up with a lead looping right hand, goes around the guard of Christian Hammer. He catches Hammer with that shot. Hammer felt it. He backs up. Then Joyce lands a barrage of punches, and Christian Hammer essentially takes a knee. Though he beats the count once again, you know, trying to go out on his shield, but, you know, Joyce at this point in time finishes the fight. Christian Hammer in survival mode, going backwards. Joyce closes the distance, throws a straight right hand followed by like a left hook come uppercut to the body. That drops Christian Hammer, and that was all she wrote. It was your typical Joe Joyce fight. Pressure, size, strength, power, output, good ability to cut the ring off, that sort of thing. He just dog-walked Christian Hammer at the end of the day. I know, defensively in this fight he left a lot of openings and he was caught on several occasions, but honestly, I just don't think he really had the respect for Christian Hammer and what was coming back. Whereas in the Daniel Dubois fight, Joe Joyce was much more circumspect, much more aware that he was in there with a big puncher, and I felt he boxed a lot better in regards to defense that night. So maybe when Joe Joyce does step up and he fights that sort of dangerous heavyweight again, he will make those similar adjustments. So, what Joe Joyce does well, he does very well. Great punch output, decent power, very good chin, very, very strong physically. He's got very quick feet as well, which is something that Joe Joyce doesn't really get credit for. He moves around that ring very quickly, whether it's coming forwards, as we saw in this fight, or moving laterally and side to side and backwards, like he was doing at times against Daniel Dubois. Joe Joyce can shift his feet very quickly, and that's going to give a lot of heavyweights trouble, given the other attributes which Joe Joyce possesses. So Joe Joyce is an interesting fighter in the heavyweight division. Extremely entertaining, there's no doubt about it. And listen, am I saying he beats everybody in the heavyweight division? Absolutely not. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has an easy fight with Joe Joyce. Hopefully now, this was a mark in time fight. It was a tune-up fight. He's been out of the ring now for quite some time, Joe Joyce. So this was his comeback fight. Hopefully in the autumn, in the fall, we see Joe Joyce in there with a more stellar opponent. I don't know who that can be, but, hopefully we see him in there with a better opponent sooner rather than later, because I want to see Joe Joyce in these big fights, 36 now, but, matching Joe Joyce seems very hard. There's not exactly a queue of fighters knocking on his door to fight him, so we'll see what he does next. Hopefully he gets a good opponent. I think he deserves it, but we'll see. Share your thoughts below. What did you make of Joe Joyce's performance? I enjoyed it for what it's worth, Joe Joyce makes these fights entertaining. Usually Christian Hammer is a spoiler, but, Joe Joyce made that shit entertaining, so fair play to Joe. Anyway, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. Peace.